My name is Jeff Resnick. I'm Chief of the History of Medicine Division at the National Library of Medicine. Thank you all for joining us today, all who are watching remotely via our global live stream, and everyone who's following us on Twitter using the hashtag NLMHistTalk. NLM's History of Medicine talks are designed to promote awareness and use of National Library of Medicine and related historical collections for research, education, and public service in biomedicine, the social sciences, and the humanities. The series also supports the commitment of the National Library of Medicine to recognize the diversity of its own collections, which span 10 centuries, encompass a range of digital and physical formats, and originate from nearly every part of the world. We also use these series to celebrate and recognize the diversity of individuals who've used these collections to advance their research, their teaching, and their learning. It's my privilege today to introduce today's speaker, Professor Anne-Marie Adams of McGill University, where she is jointly appointed in the School of Architecture and the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. She holds the Stevenson Chair in the History and Philosophy of Science, including medicine, and is currently chair of the Department of Social Studies of Medicine in McGill's Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. Professor Adams has written, co-written, and co-edited 5 books, including Architecture in the Family Way, Doctors, Houses, and Women, 1870 to 1900, published by McGill Queen's University Press, Medicine by Design, The Architect and the Modern Hospital, 1893 to 1943, published by the University of Minnesota Press, Designing Women, Gender, and the Architectural Profession, published by the University of Toronto Press, and a publication with sociologist Petta Tancred, as well as 2 volumes of Perspectives in Vernacular Architecture. Professor Adams' research has garnered numerous awards, including the Christophe Pierre Award for Research Excellence, the Jason Hanna Medal from the Royal Society of Canada, a Canadian Institutes of Health Research Health Career Award, and a YWCA Women of Distinction Prize. Professor Adams has also held research funds from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, the Hanna Institute for the History of Medicine, and she currently holds support from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada to research and write the fascinating project that she'll be discussing with us today. At McGill University, Professor Adams has been involved in the revival of the Maude Abbott Medical Museum and is a member of the Board of Curators of the Osler Library. In 2015, she was elected a Fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada, and in 2020, she became a Fellow of the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. Professor Adams' talk today is drawn from a chapter of her forthcoming biography of Canadian physician Maude Abbott. It explores how a prominent woman negotiated relationships during the early 20th century. Abbott spent most of her career at McGill University in Montreal as curator of its medical museum and as a researcher in congenital heart disease. Nonetheless, her network of correspondence was vast. Engaging an approach Professor Adams calls friendship archaeology, she will excavate Abbott's relationship with 2 powerful American physicians, Paul Dudley White and Emanuel Libman. Archival evidence, including the Libman papers held by the National Library of Medicine's History of Medicine Division, turns up links with Nobel Prize nominees and winners, revealing how very close Abbott lived to that world. Please join me in welcoming Professor Anne-Marie Adams to the National Library of Medicine to deliver Placing Women in Medicine, Maude Abbott and the Archaeology of Friendship. Over to you, Professor Adams.
Oh, Jeff, thank you very much for the introduction and the invitation. And to all who made this event possible, especially the archivists, librarians, and the student research assistants who offered heroic service during lockdown. As Jeff said, my talk today is excerpted from a book chapter, part of the Abbott biography that he mentioned. And what I hope to do today is to give a kind of snapshot of this chapter with an emphasis on National Library of Medicine materials that I collected on this fabulous trip, fabulously timed too, as it turns out, in October 2019. So this talk explores how a prominent Canadian woman researcher and physician, Maude Abbott, established strong professional networks during the interwar period. And in general, I ask how Abbott's constellation of friends and colleagues shaped her work and her life story. So as you heard in the introduction, Abbott spent most of her career here at McGill University as curator of its famous medical museum. And I have her medical museum appearing today as my Zoom backdrop. Her 1936 Atlas of Congenital Cardiac Disease classified heart diseases enhanced the understanding of the anatomy of the heart, and laid the foundations of modern heart surgery. Abbott also served as secretary of the AIMM, the International Association of Medical Museums, for 31 years. And she spent 2 years in Philadelphia at the Women's Medical College as chair of the Department of Pathology. She traveled widely for study, work, and pleasure, including at least 6 trips to Europe. And this slide on the screen now shows what is possibly the mock-up for the portrait of Abbott commissioned in 1974, which now hangs at Drexel. And the artist is Lilias Torrance Newton. Oops. So Abbott spent considerable time on outreach throughout her career, and especially on correspondence. And hundreds of doctors wrote to her with questions about particular cardiac patients. Dozens of medical museums consulted with her about how they should best organize, store, and conserve their specimens. And luckily for us, she left this abundance of evidence of her networks in letters and diaries. And this is a map I produced in 2014 showing the locations and frequency of Abbott's correspondence. And as you can see by the thicker black lines, many of her pen pals are from Boston, New York, and London. But the focus of my talk today is Abbott's relationship with 2 powerful American male physicians, Emanuel Libman and Paul Dudley White. So surveying Abbott's life and work through a novel kind of experimental approach that I'm calling friendship archaeology, which is basically digging deeply for material evidence at specific sites and times to uncover layered relationships. So my intention in formulating this approach is to try and destabilize earlier biographical accounts of Abbott, which I believe overemphasize her time in Montreal and her relationship with the heroic figure, William Osler. So because Libman and White are really well known and super accomplished and men, their biographical traces are relatively evident. And finally, and perhaps needless to say, this chapter, I think, broadens the way we study women's professional networks, a subject in which researchers often focus on friendships among women rather than professional relationships. So one really good thing about getting old, there has to be something, besides qualifying for the COVID vaccine, is being able to admit mistakes. And so when I started this chapter, I guess about 6 months ago, I wrongly assumed that Abbott was a mentee of Libman and White. Well, that was so wrong. These 2 friendships, as it turns out, were 2-directional, perhaps symmetrical in benefits, if not in power. Firstly, Abbott was older than both Libman and White, respectively by 3 and 17 years. She was thus the senior, more experienced doctor in the pairings, which of course is the usual role for mentors. Her friendships with these 2 men too differed significantly, from each other. While Boston-based White and Abbott traveled together, reviewed each other's writings, and shared best practices with cardiology patients, New York-based Libman was a long-time and mostly undisclosed financial supporter of Abbott's work. The family contexts of the 2 friendships also are really different. Ina White, married to Paul Dudley White, was also a close friend of Abbott's, while Libman was unmarried. So we know about her friendship with Libman from letters, while White's role in her life is best understood from her diaries. So that's different too. And both American doctors really admired, respected, and supported Abbott. So friendship archaeology allows me to frame this work in the evolving history of intimacy, which offers, I think, a stimulating way to see how these well-known medical figures defined zones of familiarity and comfort. A cultural studies scholar, Lauren Berlant, is my main inspiration for this, who has shown compellingly and written so beautifully about how intimacy can personalize the effects of the public sphere, and in particular urged us to study, and I quote, the ways attachments make people public. So to use Berlant's term, I believe that Abbott, quote, buttressed a life through her medical friendships. And this is a photo in the Libman archive showing Abbott at McGill. Finally, this admittedly experimental friendship archaeology methodology unearths interesting direct and indirect links with Nobel Prize nominees and winners, uncovering Abbott's proximity to that exalted realm. I argue in the book chapter that Abbott's somewhat unbounded networks enabled her to become and remain visibly invisible or invisibly visible during her 46-year career. So in other words, Abbott's high status as a researcher and physician allowed her to operate as a kind of peer in this Nobel level stratum, somewhat like an honorary man. In her case, that is, accomplishments trumped gender. And of course, here is Einstein's telegraph to Libman, wishing him a happy birthday, showing how he's in that realm. So let us begin to dig. Archaeologists, anthropologists, and even architectural historians like myself derive data from fieldwork, which requires intense focus on one place and sometimes on layers of time. I propose approaching this study of Abbott's networks by closely examining the archaeology of several events or spaces that brought my key players together. So I begin with a gala dinner in New York in 1932. In the longer paper, I also excavate restaurant meals, house visits, European vacations, a famous mural, a grant application, and a Montreal funeral. So let's dig at the so-called testimonial dinner to mark the 60th birthday of Emanuel Libman at the newly opened Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York on the 15th of October, 1932. You see the menu for the dinner here on the left. Now, New York was a really important urban context for Libman's long and prolific career as a physician, scientist, and philanthropist. He was born in New York in 1872. He studied medicine at Columbia. He practiced at Mount Sinai for more than 50 years. New York was where he did his pioneering research on endocarditis and blood culture, as well as the work that led to the naming of the Libman-Sachs disease. So it thus makes sense that he would celebrate a landmark birthday at the city's most prestigious hotel. And since there were, get this, 600 guests at the event for Libman, it likely took place in the hotel's grand ballroom, a 3-story space on the 3rd floor. The grand ballroom was, of course, grand at 12,000 square feet. The room's walls comprised 2 levels of boxes, just like in a theater, and boasted one of the finest pipe organs in the world. And you see it here in a period postcard on the right. Now, the hotel's novelty was part of its appeal. The original Waldorf Astoria Hotel had closed in 1929. That was on a different site. And the stunning Art Deco building that's still in use today and designed by architects Schultz and Weaver had opened the year before Libman's party, occupying an entire block, and you see it there under the little crown on the axonometric map, surrounded by Park Avenue, Lexington, 49th and 50th Streets, just 2 blocks east of Rockefeller Center, which would have been under construction at this time. So like Libman's career, the hotel was monumental, and the cultural importance of the new hotel was also monumental. In 1986, the New York Times described the hotel as a national symbol of the pampered life. It was a favorite venue for royalty, celebrities, and important political and cultural events, sometimes with a little bit of Hollywood glamour. And additionally, the Waldorf Astoria was the site for many medicine-related events. Part of its big appeal, I think, was its scale, like big medicine went there. And the Waldorf Astoria was at the same time a particularly important place for women's history. Examples drawn only from 1932, the same year as Libman's party, are a dinner to celebrate Amelia Earhart's solo transatlantic flight held on the 20th of June, also in the Grand Ballroom. You can see it here in this photo. And another on the 3rd of August with 200 guests to best-selling author Pearl S. Buck. So Abbott is a featured speaker at Libman's testimonial dinner, but unfortunately for me, that year is left out of her diaries. Nonetheless, her role and presence are well documented at the party in other archival sources. So according to the published seating arrangement, and here you see Abbott's personal copy of the seating arrangement, she sat at the speaker's table. You can see her name right here on the top. Like me, she benefits from alphabetical order, and she's always easy to find in a list. And she's sitting with 21 other VIP guests, including Nobel Prize winner, French surgeon Alexis Carrel, as well as noted medical educator William H. Welch. And Welch wrote the really substantive section of the 3-volume testimonies published in honor of this party. It's quite a party. So this role of speaker and sitting at the head table gave Abbott really high visibility. In the newspaper coverage of the party, Abbott is described as, quote, the foremost woman physician in the world, which must have been really evident to those who witnessed the only woman sitting at the head table. And note that of the 600 guests, very few other women were invited. It's hard to know because some of them are only identified by first initials, but it appears to have included very few spouses. So it's, I don't know, I guess like 95% men. So the notes for Abbott's speech at the testimonial dinner, archived at the National Library of Medicine, attest to Libman's financial and personal generosity in donating funds anonymously to the International Association of Medical Museums, and especially for the Sir William Osler Memorial Volume, which was published in 1926. So although Libman had expressly asked Abbott to keep his name secret, at the birthday party, she reads aloud his letter of the 28th of October, 1928, justified, she says, by the fact that the crowd assembled was made up of his most intimate friends. So the Abbott speech is characteristically unemotional. It tells a straightforward and confidential story with nothing at all revealed about Abbott's feelings for Libman or the depth of their friendship. That depth, I contend, is expressed spatially in her coveted place at the head table. And Libman's precise feelings for Abbott, we will see, will only really be revealed upon Abbott's death 8 years later. So quite apart from the rich stuff that the National Library of Medicine has on the birthday party, the library also holds a file of about 27 letters from Abbott to Libman, written between November 1924 and May 1940. But what do they reveal about the Abbott-Libman friendship? Well, in a nutshell, they show that the major themes of their friendship were 1, money, 2, William Osler, 3, teaching materials, and 4, patient care, in that order. And I'm only going to address the first 2 in this talk. Note that Abbott refers to Libman as Dr. Libman throughout her life, as you can see here on the screen in a typical letter. In every letter and nearly every diary entry, she calls him that. And he also calls her Dr. Abbott. Now, according to Libman's nephew, this psychiatrist George Engel, Libman was called Manny or later Libby by family members. She never ever mentions this, doesn't go near it. I speculate that perhaps Libman's foreboding character was the reason for their formality. Engel says of his famous uncle, I think he was basically a very shy, insecure man, and he compensated for this by exploiting his superior knowledge and skills. As a result, some people would see him as a bully, and he was, and some people would see him just as so superior in his knowledge that they dared not oppose him. He could overwhelm just about anybody. And although there are very few notations about the Abbott-Libman friendship per se, the Abbott diaries and letters refer to multiple dinners together and some phone calls. And basically their friendship played out in New York. Eating seems to be what Abbott and Libman mostly did together, which is interesting because according to Engel, the nephew, his uncle didn't eat much, but that taking colleagues out for dinner was an important part of his self-image. So the Abbott diaries pinpoint several restaurant locations with Libman, October 5th, 1939, Abbott writes, Academy and supper with Libman and Resnikoff at Plaza. Presumably this is the Plaza Hotel, with New York Academy of Medicine committee member Paul Resnikoff. June 14th, 1940, perhaps their last meal together by my math. Dinner with Dr. Libman at Voisin and Dr. Wachtel. Voisin was an upscale French restaurant at 375 Park for 40 years. This cover of the New Yorker issue from 1939, I love this cover, includes a charming article about Libman by writer Samuel Nathan Behrman. And I think its spirit of the cover captures their time together in New York, in upscale New York restaurants, which must have been such a treat for Abbott. Wasn't the way she lived here. So the most important theme to emerge from the letters is money. Emanuel Libman gave Maude Abbott money for publications and for her debts during the whole span of the NLM letters, 1926 to 40. So these were mostly small amounts from $250 to $1,000, but were pretty constant and were mostly for expenses arising from her work as secretary of the IAMM, International Association of Medical Museums. For example, he gave her $250 in February 1926, then $1,000 in October 1928. In November 1929, it was another $200. Exceptionally, in 1932, Abbott asks him for money for McGill's Graduate School of Nursing, like big money. The next year, December, he doesn't give it. The next year, December 1933, it's another $500. Now, I'm no authority on friendship types. Remember, I'm an architectural historian, but I might categorize this relationship as friendly philanthropy. And a really important detail is that Libman wants it to stay anonymous. So there are check receipts like this nice one in the NLM files. So Libman's home life is fascinating. When Abbott says in her diary, called on Dr. Libman in the AM, for example, on the 29th of March in 1940, I think that she means to his house. He lived here in this yellow house. This is showing in Google Earth views, this yellow house with this unusual lowered entry. It was his parents' house at 180 East 64th Street. Eventually, he lived there with his widowed sister Esther and her 3 sons, including twins who both became doctors. And we've already heard quite a few quotes from one of those twins, captured in an extraordinary 86-page NLM interview done in 1985. So remembering his childhood, like because George Engel grew up in this house with his uncle, Engel attests that Libman's public reputation differed radically from the private man who lived reclusively in his upper floor bedroom where he welcomed same-sex lovers. Although it is never mentioned in the Abbott archives, Libman had a private pathological collection of livers, kidneys, and hearts in jars in his basement, which must have been fascinating to Abbott. I mean, look at these jars in the Maude Abbott Medical Museum. Like, she lived with this stuff. She never mentions his museum. So Engel says that Maude Abbott was the only woman Libman had ever mentioned, ever. And also that Libman showed great disappointment when young doctors he was sponsoring, because he sponsored young doctors financially, got married. Engel remembers, he took the very strong position for which he always buttressed himself with the authority of Osler, that medicine must be your mistress. So I speculate that these ways of being in the world may have endeared him to Maude Abbott, who was also unmarried, childless, lived in the house where she grew up, with a sibling, was somewhat eccentric, had experienced discrimination, and of course loved things in jars. In 1920, she lived in this modest row house at 299 Prince Arthur, in the student neighborhood just east of McGill. We call it the McGill Ghetto, a far cry from Libman's 4-level mansion and 3 servants. Berlant reminds us, when there are so many people, only one plot counts as life. Those who don't or can't find their way in that story, the queers, the single, the something else, can be so easily unimaginable, even often to themselves. So I contend that these interests and characteristics that Libman and Abbott shared helped each other imagine themselves. So Libman sent this quite dashing photo portrait to guests, the 600 guests who attended the dinner, as a kind of souvenir. This one is signed to New York medical researcher Jesse G. M. Beloa, who sat at table 13. I'm using it to illustrate Libman's considerable power, which came from his role as a gatekeeper in medicine. In addition to his constant funding of Abbott, he financed and mentored dozens of medical students and colleagues. He was particularly supportive of young Jewish doctors who faced discrimination at this time. This gatekeeping extended to the very highest levels. So thanks to Nobel historian Niels Hansen, I know that Libman acted as nominator no fewer than 6 times from 1925 to 36, including for some of the guests of his birthday party, and twice for birthday party guest Hungarian-born pediatrician Béla Schick. His gatekeeping role with Abbott, however, until just before she died, was really all about money. Now, the second theme apparent in the Abbott correspondence is William Osler. The letters reveal relatively little about Libman's feelings for Abbott, with the exception of this one that he wrote just after she died in 1940. In that letter, which you see here, September 7th, 1940, he discloses something quite extraordinary to Osler librarian W.W. Francis. He says, "One of the things I most appreciated was her feeling of piety for the memory of W. Osler. That was the main motive of my impulse to be any service. It was a small way of expressing my appreciation of what Dr. Osler had meant and done for me since my earliest days." So he's basically saying that Osler had been his motivation for supporting Abbott's projects all those years, and that their friendship, or Abbott herself, served as a kind of human bridge between Libman and Osler. Through Abbott, that is, Libman channeled Osler. So further evidence that this is really what he meant, which I didn't want to believe for a while, unequivocally, is that in another letter, when he says that Abbott's death in 1940 will mean he will feel even further separated from Osler, who by that time, of course, had been dead for more than 20 years. So significantly, he also admits at this time that Abbott may have been lonely. I suspect Libman, too, knew something about loneliness. A few days after Abbott's funeral, he writes again to Francis, the Osler librarian. "I'm attempting to analyze why I felt sadder in St. Andrews than I usually do on such occasions. Was it that I felt how lonely her life was? I believe that was part of it, and the reason I believe was that I must have felt a further separation from Dr. Osler." So Libman himself lives only 6 years longer, dying in 1946. So Libman's separation from Osler at Abbott's death was marked by a very special gift to the Osler Library, shown here. A bound copy of the special issue on Osler that Libman had funded and had given to Abbott in 1927. And you can see that that Libman had written a special, he had it bound, he wrote a special dedication to Abbott, but he didn't add her name. And Francis then adds her name after the funeral and says that the book will be held, because it would have touched Osler's heart, the book will be held for a while in the Holy of Holies with his ashes. So the second half of the longer written paper, but I'm de-emphasizing it here because of the really strong NLM connection to Libman, is on Abbott's friendship with Paul Dudley White, the so-called Dean of Preventive Cardiology, and of course, a pioneering advocate of the benefits of regular exercise and good diet on health part. He was a very avid walker and cyclist, and Abbott was not at all interested in healthy diet or in fitness. And he wrote 12 books and 700 articles. White and Abbott met in 1923, a year before he married social worker Ina Helen Reed. And Abbott was invited upon the suggestion of McGill-educated Boston-based cardiologist Harold Segal. He too was at the birthday party to give a lecture to the New England Heart Association. And that marked the beginning of a really long and significant friendship between Abbott and the two Whites, mostly focused on travel. And they went to, in 1929, 32, and 35, went to Italy, Greece and Italy, and Italy. And the trips are recorded in her regular diaries and in a special travel diary. I speculate that since they spent so much time together, there are relatively few letters between Abbott and White. In some sections of the diary, she's traveling with Paul and Ina for such long stretches that she doesn't even mention them. You know, I think they're kind of like part of the furniture, you know, like family members. They're just there. So this is glaringly different, and she refers to them by their initials, which is glaringly different than the Libman diary entries. And their time together was filled with sightseeing and talking and reviewing their new work on cardiology. And the sheer delight that Abbott takes in being with them is so evident by her use of adjectives like heavenly, jolly, delightful. This is what her diaries look like, just so you can have some sympathy for how difficult it is to read them. But I just want to point out that also we have what hotel she and the Whites stayed in every single night. And these are not at all hotels like the Waldorf Astoria. So that's different too. I also want to point out that White and Abbott have a kind of intimate relationship in that when White is sick, she takes care of him. And so at many points in her diary, she records his body temperature. And she also confides in him the story of her unwell sister, Alice, who she took care of throughout her life. So the diary reports on that. A lovely talk with Paul before the fire, told him the whole story of Alice's illness. And then like funny things like today, Paul had a temperature of 100.4. We had a great evening. Then he was down to 98 degrees. So like they have this chummy relationship, so different than Libman, and intimate in that kind of way. So, and of course, Paul Dudley White and Abbott share this deep interest in cardiology, and Abbott is at the top of her game in the 1930s. The diaries reveal how much they helped each other with these publications. For example, when they're in Italy, Abbott talks to White about the atlas on several occasions. You see a page from the atlas here. And I mean, we just have amazing detail on that. June 27th, 1935. Dr. White reviews the atlas while the other travel companions tour Milano sites. Wakened early, chocolate shake by the cathedral, then went over the atlas with Paul. One has to wonder what he thought of her eating habits. And then just as White reviewed her work, she reviewed his. So he sent her this amazing manuscript to Montreal of chapter 12, Congenital Cardiovascular Defects from Jamaica on the 11th of March, 1930, asking her for corrections and suggestions. So he definitely defers to her on this. And this was for his classic 1931 textbook, Heart Disease. So my favorite space shared by Abbott and White is Diego Rivera's magnificent diptych mural on the history of cardiology in Mexico City. Both Abbott and White are on the right-hand panel shown here, and they're here, just to be quick here. Abbott is here and White is here. And it was painted in 1944, so Abbott is dead, White is still alive. And Rivera positions Abbott, who as I mentioned, had died 4 years early, right at the top of the pyramid of the cardiologists. And you can see she's tending to a child right here and is accompanied by a nurse. And as material cues to who she is, there's a medical museum specimen here beside her, and also a drawing hanging over the railing right in front of her. So there's no doubt in my mind that Rivera looked to a photograph from Abbott's trip to California. You see it here, included in Hugh McDermott's biography, published in 1941. I've also identified this important diagram that Rivera surely used from Abbott's atlas. Now, Rivera's depiction of Paul Dudley White is to the lower. You see there's almost a line between them here. He's this guy right here. So this pediment that holds her drawing and her specimen steps down to this diagonal line that almost hits White in the temple, who holds a rolled paper in his left hand. He wears a modern business suit, a white shirt, and a striped tie. And I think I've also discovered the photo source used by Rivera for White. You can see it's pretty darn close. And happily, that's also at the NLM. It's nearly correct. I need to get back to the library as soon as the border opens to see if I can find some other photos like this, maybe taken the same day, because you can see the angle of the head is not perfect. So remarkably, we have no photos of Abbott with either friend, Libman or White, even though I know some were taken. The precious traces of their friendships are in diary entries, letters, memoirs, poetry, family interviews, obituaries, magazine articles, seating arrangements, house plans, paintings, at least one mural, and gatherings. The longer paper ends with the funeral of another doctor, Louis Gross, in 1937, where I use the same technique as the birthday party that brings the three characters together. And I think the sources really tell a lot about Abbott's constellation of friends. From the words, I've tried to reconstruct the places in which these characters performed their lives, shaping her work and life story, and hence my title today, Placing Women in Medicine. So in the end, what have we learned? The takeaways are the following. 1, Abbott had significant two-way and somewhat symmetrical friendships with powerful men. 2, they were top men, so to speak, in medicine. 3, this status brought her into close proximity with a dozen or so Nobel Prize winners, nominees, and nominators. 4, often in the spaces and places she shared with these friends, she was at the top or at the head table or played a leading role. 5, they won or nominated others for major prizes, placing them at the top. And her roles were enhanced by her singleness and her mobility. I dare to say that we have also learned things about the men through this approach. So Engel writes of Uncle Manny, I don't think anyone loved him. Abbott looked out on Libman's 600 guests at the Waldorf Astoria in 1932, almost all male doctors, and called them his intimate friends. So Harold Siegel, shown here on the left, also with Abbott's very good friend, pathologist Helen Ingleby, who succeeded her in Philadelphia, writes of Abbott, she thirsted for contact with clinical people. So I think Engel and Siegel and most biographers of Abbott couldn't see intimacy beyond sex and marriage. Her diaries attest, however, to how she was constantly surrounded every day by so-called clinical people, whom she considered her friends, whom she loved and who loved her. In the poem Abbott wrote to the Whites, it's called On Foot to Ravello, she muses on her singularity and their togetherness. She says, discoursing merrily on this, which I alone did see, we reached at last Ravello's gate, Ina, Paul, and me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Adams. Outstanding talk. We do have time for questions, and I'd like to share with our audience that there are 2 ways that you can share your questions with me as the moderator. The first is right below the live stream. You see the send feedback link, and if you click on that and you fill out the form, you can send your question, and that will go directly to me. And I'm happy to share your question with Professor Adams. You can also send questions to me via direct message on Twitter at NLM HisTalk or through a tweet to NLM HisTalk. So I'm monitoring both. We do have 3 questions. And the first, Professor Adams, regarding Abbott's and Libman's shared affinity for William Osler, did they collaborate on any projects to memorialize Osler or otherwise publicize his work? The American Osler Society was not established until the 1960s. but were there predecessors involving Abbott and Libman?
Well, yes, their main project was this 1926 special issue, memorial issue to the of the Bulletin of the International Association of Medical Museums, which wouldn't have happened without Libman's funding. And of course, Abbott put it together. It's a very, very important publication. But I suspect too that when they were out for all those fancy dinners in New York, we're talking on the phone, they were constantly talking about Osler, which is so interesting. I don't think Abbott would have ever seen Libman as a bridge for her to channel Osler, but certainly Libman saw her that way.
Thank you. Another question we have, can you share more about the impact of the current pandemic on your research, positive and negative?
Yes, I would love to answer that. So the impact, well, it's kind of a double-edged thing. My historian husband and I, Peter Gossage, we took this amazing trip in October 2019 to gather biographical sources in Philadelphia and Bethesda. We had, of course, had no idea that the world was going to shut down, and collected amazing things. And I think the positive thing is, because I only had that material, I had to really focus on what like 27 letters could tell me. Because my usual way is I take way too long to write books, and I go to way more archives than I need to, and I collect every single thing I can on the planet. So the lockdown has really forced me to focus, which I think is a much better way to use a material culture approach, because you can dig down to find material things. So of course there are many negative things that I haven't been able to be at the libraries that I love to work in so much, and see my colleagues and go to conferences, all the things all of us have experienced. But I really, really need to get back to the NLM, because when I was there, I didn't really know what I was going to write about Libman. I only knew that he was one of her major correspondents. So, I mean, rather naively, all I did was copy that file that said Abbott on it. But now, of course, I know there's a big box on the birthday party. I know there's all this stuff on Libman on his connections to the Nobel Prize winners and nominees that I really got to get back to. But you just never know when you start what you're going to need. And I always tell students that the more they can constrict or contain or limit their research question, the sharper the question is, the better the research will be. And that I think this is an example of that.
Thank you. Another question we received, what about sustained friendships with persons not in medicine?
Yes. Well, I have a whole part of the chapter on her friendships with women, and a few of them are in medicine, but many of them aren't. So Eastlake, for example, who painted several portraits of her, was one of her childhood friends, and they had a long friendship throughout her life. And I started out, I mean, again, this is, I'm now old enough that I can admit these mistakes, thinking that her relationships with women would be somehow simpler, but of course they aren't at all. But I really love comparing how she writes about her women friends in her diary compared to the men. She often uses nicknames, and she really existed in an amazing way. One thing I didn't say was it didn't really matter to her that she was Canadian. It's just not at all part of her image. And she just traveled so fluidly and openly. And those were the days when you could do that.
Thank you. Another question. This person asks about your analytical framework, the archaeology of friendships.
Yeah.
How did you develop this framework? More specifically, how did your work as an architectural historian inform the construction of that framework? And where do you plan to take this framework in other places beyond Abbott?
Well, I'm kind of embarrassed to say that I came about it in kind of a non-scientific way, and that is that I just realized that I was using a lot of vocabulary like unearth and dig and layer. So then I thought maybe I could do something with this archaeology idea. So then I really pushed it. And I think what's maybe innovative about it is looking at the idea of the event, like the spectacle in all its connections. And also I'm going to try to look at spectacles or gatherings that aren't necessarily medical. So that means, I mean, my first instinct always, especially as a Berkeley trained architectural historian, is to, imagine the setting, even if it's just an everyday place. So the Waldorf Astoria was easy because it's so grand and famous, but the site of Louis Gross's funeral in 1937 in Montreal, at Paperman's funeral home, its original site, which has never been photographed, just as like a mundane place. So that's when I really use my training as a historian of vernacular architecture or everyday places. But as you can probably see, my instinct is always to spatialize things and to get at the material cues. I'm kind of worried because this is my least architectural project ever. So I'm reaching back to architecture whenever I can. And I've written a lot about women architects, so I think that's really helped me think about women physicians, although I know much less about them.
Thank you.
I hope that answers the question.
So someone's written in to ask about the Maude Abbott Museum,
Okay.
asking if you could tell us more about the museum and whether they assume that it's closed for now, but can you share more about the museum and can people visit that museum when it is presumably open?
Yes, so this is just a Zoom backdrop, but this is how the museum actually looks. And it's in the Strathcona building, one of my favorite buildings at McGill, and is the early 20th century medical school building. It moved around a couple of different sites. It was in the pathology building, but thanks to the heroic efforts of Dr. Rick Fraser and Joan O'Malley, the specimens have moved back to the Strathcona to one of their original sites. It is visitable. CNN named it as one of the, I forget what it is, one of the top 10 weird museums. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's such a gem and such an important place at McGill for not only Abbott's legacy, but just for teaching. And it has, in the age of Instagram, it has a lot of appeal. So I don't know if you can see, but her original specimens are there, and some of the specimens that predate her from Osler's autopsies that survived a terrible fire are also there, and it's well documented. Everybody should come and see it.
Very good. So we have another question, not from the same individual, but asking about the Osler Library, whether that people can go and visit the Osler and what they know about it online. This person's, I know about the Osler online, but can I go to Montreal and visit the Osler Library?
Well, the Osler Library experienced a tragic fire in the summer of 2018 and has been relocated temporarily to the main university library, McLennan. The damage has been repaired. The library has been restored to its condition from 2018, and there are plans for it to move back, but it hasn't yet moved back. So if you visited it soon, you would just visit the material in the McLennan Library.
Thank you. So we have another question that's come in. You mentioned the specimens that are in the Maude Abbott Museum. Can you say more about her preparation of those specimens? How were they obtained? How were they prepped? And what is that aspect of her story?
Yeah, I really am not the right person to do that. Rick Fraser is, but I can say that she was considered a great expert on the technique of preserving them in jars and like spreading out the organs so they'd be seen the right way. and in organizing the entire museum. Many other collections copied that. What's the other part of the question? How did she do it? They're in pretty good shape. Rick and Joan take fantastic care of them.
Where were they obtained?
Oh, they were obtained in autopsies. And there's a record of where a lot of that came from.
We received a question about when your work is going to appear, this biography.
I wish I had a crystal ball. But one thing I haven't said, Jeff, I hope you don't mind if I add that, because maybe
not at all.
It's about half done, maybe, the book manuscript. The big idea behind the book is to write a kind of feminist spatial biography of Maude Abbott. And what I mean by that is instead of focusing on the constraints she faced, which is what almost everything written about her is about, I'm focusing on the spaces that she actually occupied. And it's very inspired by Carolyn Heilbrunn and Dana Arnold and other feminist biography experts who really called for a different approach to women's biography. So I thought I'd try it. I am very far from being a biography expert. But I think that this kind of biography that, as you can see, renders a different story, might mean that more girls and young women would be attracted to STEM professions and medicine, because I mean every book just is about all the barriers that they face, and this is a different. I think this is closer to what Abbott experienced. So that's the big idea. There's each chapter has a material or spatial focus. And so there's a whole chapter just on the portraits and on the museum, of course. I've written one paper people might be interested in called Encountering Maude Abbott, which is a kind of proposal for the book.
And where does that paper appear for those who might want to go find it?
I'll have to say it's called Feminist Encounters.
Well, with respect of your big idea, which is a fantastic idea, and apropos of Women's History Month, which of course March is, I would like to thank you for your talk today and welcome you warmly back to the National Library of Medicine when we do reopen to the public, and wish you and your family and your colleagues much health and productivity in Montreal, and look forward to our paths crossing again. Thank you very much, Professor Adams, for your talk today.
Thank you to everybody for joining in.
Thank you. And Professor Adams' talk will be available in the NIH Videocast archive in the next couple of days. And I will send out the link through my Twitter feed. And everyone is welcome to contact me if you wish for any further information. Professor Adams, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.